the way you look at a thing changes the thing entirely, actually. Till now, what we were doing was we were using the critical reasoning more of a definition or a theoretical way we were using. So in that way, what exactly happens is थोड़ा सा लगता है कि difficult है, logic, rationality, many things they are talking about, and it looks like a very difficult section to ace. But critical reasoning is the most easiest of all the sections of verbal if you are having a right perspective, the way of looking at the CR. मैं आपको अपना एक examples देता हूँ. Many the times we see as a teacher, the students who are very good in numbers will do very good in critical reasoning, and the people who struggle with numbers are not good in CR. इसको एक और वे में पुटिंग इट अक्रॉस, हम जब टीचर्स को रिक्रूटमेंट्स भी करते हैं, जब हम क्या नोटिस करते हैं कि लैंग्वेज जिनके स्किल्स बहुत स्ट्रांग हैं, द पीपल हु हैव वेरी गुड लैंग्वेज स्किल्स यूजुअली स्ट्रगल विद द CR, and the people who are very good in numbers do CR very quickly. So what the point I'm trying to make is, usually the CR, if you look at the good teachers in CR, they are not actually the English teachers or the verbal, or I would say more language kind of a teachers, or the people who handle reading comprehension very well. These teachers usually are the teachers who are more of a maths teacher. So maths teacher CR बहुत easily करते हैं. अब question है why that happens. Okay. Now, if you look at the CR, मैं ये total जो बात आपसे कर रहा हूँ, basically मेरा idea क्या है कि आपका way of looking change हो, perspective, the way you think, the way you understand the whole thing will change the whole game. Even life में भी आपका perspective बहुत important है. The way you look at life, आप life को एक स्ट्रगल के रूप में देख रहे हैं या एक हैप्पी जर्नी के रूप में देख रहे हैं, वो जस्ट लुकिंग एट ए थिंग, एक तरीका देखने का विल चेंज द होल पर्सपेक्टिव. अच्छा, ओके. नाउ कमिंग बैक टू द CR, दे आर बेसिकली 4 पिलर्स ऑफ द CR. ओके, द फर्स्ट थिंग व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट इन द CR इज कॉल्ड लॉजिकल रीजनिंग. This is a very important pillar of the CR. Okay. The second main pillar of CR is the problem solving. Okay. The third thing is analytical thinking process. I'll just मैं तीनों चारों आपको I will describe it. The fourth and the last one, what we can say is pattern recognition. How you understand the patterns. Patterns को recognize करना. If I look at the logical reasoning, the first part, in CR, what we do is, or what is logical reasoning per se? Logical reasoning is when we divide the whole thing into sequence of steps and solve each and every step. Sequence of steps and solving each and every step using logic, or maybe deduction, or might be rationality, or using a rational understanding of the situation of the common sense, or logic as we call it. Problem solving. What is problem solving? When you look at any complex problem, obviously CR is a complex problem, we divide the whole part into small parts, try to look at what critical point is in the question, or which part we have to look at, and which part to which we have to provide a solution to. किस part का हमें solution देना है? पहला part है कि हमें complex issue को या problem को smaller parts में बांटना, and after that we are trying to solve each and every part in a different way. Now the third thing we talk about is the analytical thinking. What is analytical thinking? It's a way to look at a thing in a more analytical way. What does it mean? Many of the people when you talk to, you will just ask them a very simple question. Let's say if you are asking a very logical question to them, let's say the question is, why do you want to have dash in dinner or lunch? So what they will answer is, many of the people, how they will answer is, they will say, this is my first reason, this is my second reason, this is my third reason. And this is the way, this is much more of an analytical thinking. The point analytical thinking when I talk about is, when we divide the whole thing into different parts. For example, if I'm talking to you, you may say, sir, this thing you are talking about, do you have a proof of it? Is it a fact you're talking about, or is it your assumption, or is it your conclusion? Is it your inference? This is what analytical thinking is. Analytical thinking is when we divide the whole discussions or subjective essay or a passage into different part and look at it in a much more, I would say, discrete or distinct way. So in analytical thinking, the most important part would be your discreteness. So discreteness, okay? And the second part would be distinctiveness. So what exactly I'm trying to talk about is, when you are able to put the things into distinct and discrete parts or factors. Okay. The pattern recognition is obviously very easy to understand. Pattern recognition is to understand the pattern of the talk or the direction the talk is going. Now, looking at all these 4 pillars which I talked about, now इसमें आप मुझे ये बताओ, आपको कुछ फैमिलियर लग रहा है? ऐसा ही एक किसी और सब्जेक्ट में भी ये पिलर्स होते हैं, एक और सब्जेक्ट में भी हम इन्हीं चीजों को पढ़ते हैं. So what I'm trying to say is, in CR, the main 4 pillars of CR is actually very close to the 4 pillars of a subject called maths, or in your understanding, what we can call it as quant. Okay, so math skills and CR skills, or the basic idea is actually the same. So the point what I'm trying to say is, if you're using a math skill to solve CR questions, it would become very easy for you to handle the CR section. Now, as a if you're going for any exams, let's say I'm giving one, there are 2 exams I'm giving. One is maths and one is, let's say, verbal or English. I get into a mode of it. Let's say if I'm starting a quant, what the mode I'm into is solutions, numbers, factors, multiples. I'm going to solve the whole equation, and I'm going to divide the whole equation into different parts. And I'm saying I come into a mode which I call it as quant mode or a maths mode. But when I look at the verbal part, and usually, let's say, if I'm giving an example of reading comprehension, what exactly the mode I come into? I come into the reading kind of a mode. So my mode changes. But when you come into the CR topic, please come into the mode of as you are doing a math section. Okay, so look at the CR question as a maths question in which you will have factors. It will be divided into factors, multiples. It will have subtraction, multiplications. It will have everything which would be very discrete and which would have a very distinct part, and you have to work on each and every part. For example, let's say in CR, there is a one set of questions which we call it as assumptions-based questions. Ab assumption-based questions mein, the first thing you have to understand is what is an assumption. Assumption is what is not stated, or what अगर normal English में हम बोलते हैं, जो हम assume करते हैं, जो है नहीं और हम assume करते हैं, उसे कहते हैं assumption. Now, if I have to, let's say, hit the assumption part, I should be knowing what is an assumption, or I should be able to, I would say, take out the assumption from the passage. मुझे उस passage में assumption पहले पता होना चाहिए कि assumption क्या है, then only I can negate it, or I can work on it. The same thing comes with the conclusion part. Let's say in a passage I am concluding. Usually the conclusion will lie at the end, लेकिन जरूरी नहीं है. ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि passage might start with a conclusion. Okay, so the point what I'm saying is when you look at the IQ test, it's more of a context understanding. So I will not say the conclusion will obviously always fall at the end. It can be anything. So the point what I'm trying to say is, if I say to you, the question is strengthen the argument or weaken the argument, what exactly I'm trying to say is weaken or strengthen the conclusion part. अब अगर किसी को यही ना पता हो कि कंक्लूजन है कहाँ या कंक्लूजन क्या चीज है इसमें, तो that student cannot do it. So what the point I'm trying to make is उस passage में mathematically look into it and divide the passages into different parts like statements, like background, like a premise or a fact or a proof or an assumption or an inference or in conclusion. If you are able to divide the passage into these parts, your working on a CR will become much easy. Okay, so the point what I'm trying to say is have a perspective of doing the CR, just like get into the maths mode, get into the more number kind of a mode, rather than being a kind of a reader kind of a mode, or I would say doing CR, reading comprehension kind of a mode. Don't come into it. Okay. Now, one more aspect I want to talk about, which will also help you with the perspective, would be have an understanding that there's a difference between the realistic world and the logical world. Usually in the studies, even in the maths or any even in the CR and all, we actually are into the logical world. So what might be true in the logical world might not be true in the realistic world. I'll give an example to you. Why this perspective is important. So I'm actually just taking this class just for one thing, and that is to have a clear perspective. देखने का तरीका I'm just trying to change. Okay. So the first perspective I would like to once more एक बार और repeat करता हूँ कि it take CR as a math section and not as a verbal section. It will help you to do CR very quickly. The second important perspective which I'm talking about right now is the looking into, am I looking into the realistic world or the logical world? I'll give you two kind of examples there. In reasoning, there are two types of reasoning we do. Usually we do inductive reasoning, or we might even do deductive reasoning. In inductive reasoning, हम एक चीज को, एक स्पेसिफिक चीज को पूरे पॉपुलेशन पे अप्लाई कर देते हैं, और डिडक्टिव में वाइस वर्सा. I'll give an example to you. Let's say मैं एक फ्रूट मार्केट में गया हूँ, मैं एक फ्रूट्स खरीदने चाहता हूँ. I want to buy a fruit. Let's say I'm buying a mango. Okay. Now looking at the total, I want to buy the basket. मुझे पूरा एक बैग चाहिए mangoes का, जो पूरा basket full of mangoes I want to buy. So let's say I pick one mango and find it it's not good, or it's a raw mango. I don't want to have it. Now, if let's say I take one more mango, I have picked two mangoes and I found both of them to be raw. Now, in inductive reasoning, what I will say is the whole basket is actually raw. मुझे नहीं खरीदना है, ये सब कच्चा है और ये कच्चा आम है और मैं नहीं खरीदना चाहता. इसे कहते हैं इंडक्टिव रीजनिंग, जिसमें हम एक स्पेसिफिक चीज को टोटल पॉपुलेशन पे अप्लाई कर देते हैं. तो इंडक्टिव रीजनिंग में लेट्स से मैंने दो मैंगोस में और बास्केट में 100 मैंगोस हैं, मैंने उस पर अप्लाई कर दिया. तो लॉजिकल वर्ल्ड में दिस इंडक्टिव रीजनिंग इज व्हाट वी कॉल इट एज ट्रू. It stands true. But in realistic world, it will fail. Why it will fail in the realistic world is that in the realistic world, what will happen is, ऐसा हो सकता है कि दो ही मैंगो सिर्फ में बेकार हो या रॉ हो और बाकी मैंगो सही हो. सो लॉजिकल वर्ल्ड उसे ट्रू कहता है, लेकिन रियलिस्टिक वर्ल्ड उसे ट्रू नहीं बोलता है. अब इसी चीज में हम डिडक्टिव रीजनिंग में उल्टा करते हैं कि मैंने पूरी बास्केट को देखा, या मैं एक और एग्जांपल देता हूं कि I met, I have seen all the people, let's say, living in a particular village, and I found everyone intelligent. And let's say if one person comes to me and I meet a person and he tells me that he's from that village, so I assume that he's also intelligent. So this is called deductive reasoning, where we use a population characteristic and we apply into a specific example or a one individual. So that is deductive reasoning. In deductive reasoning, the both thing will stand true. What I'm saying, trying to make out is when we are doing any CR, if we are particularly talking about, I am into this kind of a world and not into the realistic kind of a world. Now, in the realistic kind of a world, there is also one other example, one more I am going to give. Now, okay. In realistic world, in mostly specific talking to the logical world, even if we are, we always look at, if you're looking at an answer options, usually the gray area answers would always be correct. Anything which is extreme, like I will call it a white black question kind of a thing, which is an extreme, would always be wrong. So any words like which would be all inclusive, like let's say entirely or all or everyone, this will always be wrong. Gray areas means like many, most, some, any, these kind of a thing in which the gray areas would mostly be right. The point what I'm trying to say is anything very extreme in realistic world stands true. But in extreme, when we look at in the logical world, anything which is very narrow or which is very broad or which is having a kind of entirety or kind of an extreme options would be wrong in the logical world. Now, even one more example, I'm going to give the same thing, talking about the realistic and the logical world. Let's say I'm talking to you. In realistic world, the main thing is the meaning part. Am I able to give you the communication? Am I able to communicate? So in realistic world, the meaning stands true. But in logical world, even with the meaning, your structure is also very important, and even your conciseness. How in some words you are able to describe the full thing, even that is also very important. So the point what I'm trying to say is there used to be a section in one of the IQ tests which we used to call it a sentence correction. If two sentences having the same meaning and one is having much more concise and a direct way of putting used to be the correct answer compared to the answers which is much more elaborate. So what I'm trying to say is there's a difference between the two worlds, realistic and the logical world. Okay. Now, one more part I want to talk about is as I've already stated in many of my classes, that the third perspective, which is very important, is you should always understand that there is a difference between an IQ test. The IQ test and usually the different tests which we have been giving in school and the colleges, which are more of theoretical kind of a test. But in IQ test, it is not a language test, or it is not even a knowledge test. The point would, let's say if I'm sticking to the verbal thing only today, it will never check your vocabulary. It will never check when you're reading, and it will never check your literature skills. It will never check your grammar skills. IQ test always checks one thing, and that is called understand. Now, आपका क्वेश्चन मुझसे हो सकता है कि इस पर्सपेक्टिव से फायदा क्या है? इससे बहुत फायदा है. I'll give an example to you. Let's say क्या example? Let's say I'm teaching you driving. मैं आपको ड्राइविंग सिखा रहा हूँ और मैंने आपको सिखाया, I just took you for a driving lesson where I taught you all about the handle, the clutch, the brake, and the speed and everything. And let's say I told you many things about the car, and when you came back to me, the question came, let's say if I'm testing that what exactly you learned from my class, the driving class, and my first question is, what is the difference between an automatic car and a semi-automatic car, or what is the difference between AMT or an AT? Automatic manual transmission or an automatic transmission. So the point is, if you know that what exactly the question is going to be, or what kind of a question it might be, the test would be asking, you would prepare for that only. You will focus on that kind of a knowledge. Now, if let's say coming back to this example in the verbal, if my concentration is to improve my reading skills, and if my focus is to have a good vocabulary, to have a good knowledge about different difficult words, to let's say memorize the dictionary, my dictionary to memorize karo. Let's say I am focusing on the grammar skills, it will not help me actually. The point what I'm trying to say is, in IQ test, it is not important for me to read fast. It is not important for me to know difficult words. It is important to me to have a good understanding. If I am able to, I'll give an example. Let's say there are many difficult words in a passage, and I am able to understand the passage without even going into the understanding of a difficult the words. And I'm good. I understand the full meaning, or the main idea, or the contextual meaning of the whole passage. I've done my part actually. This is what is expected in an IQ test. You are not expected to know a difficult word. You are not even expected to read fast. You are not. The only thing is, if I'm reading it once, I have to read it very carefully, and I shouldn't be going back to the passage. I shouldn't have a regression kind of a thing. The whole passage, going back to the passages, will obviously take my time. But the point is, then also the focus is the understanding and not the reading fast. If I'm even reading fast, it will not help me. If read it as much as you can understand it. If you are understanding it, keep the same speed going on. The point what I'm trying to say is the perspective that what that test actually is checking will help you in preparing. So, ये perspective important. Achha, now moving back to the questions, where I will like to tell you how exactly I'm saying that the CR is very close to math. So just like math section, before moving forward, I want you to even look at this video. Okay, ये video जब भी आप CR, if you're doing a CR, always keep this video in your mind, so you will understand what is expected from you. Many of the times in the IQ test, most of the times, rather all the times, I'm using extreme word all the times. You are expected to have a good common sense or logic or rationality. IQ test is based upon common sense, logic, and rationality. Okay, so look at this video and try to understand what I am saying. Number one, what I'm trying to communicate, and the most important of all, always keep this video when you're doing any IQ test. Okay. So what exactly this video is talking about is the use of common sense. So keep this video in your mind when you're doing any CR question. Rather, in all the IQ tests, keep this video in your mind. So common sense, logic, use these things in the IQ test, and you would be much more better equipped to handle the questions. Now, let's say I'm talking about one of the question here. I am just talking about this question. Let's say the point we are trying to prove here is a perspective. The things we talked about earlier, we will just try to see how exactly that is helping us in the CR. So the question here is, people have noticed some abnormalities in the eel that are immediately downstream of a leather mills. Okay, there's a leather mill, the water is flowing through there, and it is actually affecting the eel. One possible cause is pyroxene. It's some chemical, I think, which leather mills release daily and which can alter the concentration of hormones in the eel. However, pyroxene is unlikely to be the cause. Since the eel recover normal hormone concentration relatively quickly during occasionally mill shutdowns, and pyroxene decomposes very slowly in the environment. Okay, which the following statement, if true, most seriously weakens the argument. Now, looking at the total passage, everything is actually contributing to different parts. There is some parts are only the background knowledge. Some things are statements, might not have any I would say direction. Some parts will have a kind of more of a, I would say, proof. Just like, let's say, one premise we can say is it is caused by pyroxene, which leather mills release daily. So this is what it is that would be called a kind of a proof. When we deal with the different sections, we have the first thing what I'm doing is I'm trying to, just a minute. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to divide the whole passages into different parts. So what exactly I'm doing, just like the same thing, just like logical reasoning, that the same kind of a logic I'm using. I'm more of a kind of analytical thinking or problem solving skills where I'm dividing the whole thing into different parts or smaller parts, and then I'm trying to solve each and every problem area, and that is what we call it as logical reasoning, problem solving, analytical thinking, and everything. The same math skills I'm using here. So I'm now in the maths mode. So when I say which the following statement, if true, most seriously weakens the argument, if anything is weakening the argument, what exactly it would be weakening? See, if in a passage, let's say, some of the things are, let's say, a simple arguments. Arguments means anything which you are making to prove having a direction. Anything which is having a premise means the proof. The third thing when we talk about is an assumption. I'll not move into assumptions here. Let's say fourth thing I'm talking about is a conclusion. So when I'm saying that what exactly weakens the argument, actually it will weaken my conclusion. So the first part is to recognize what is a conclusion. So try to look at the passage once more, and you will find that what exactly is the conclusion is the last part in this passage, which says pyroxene is unlikely to be the cause. रीजन what they are giving the reason is, वो रीजन ये दे रहे हैं कि जब भी मिल्स शटडाउन होता है तो the eel actually recovers the normal hormone concentration very quickly. और pyroxene तो decompose slowly होता है. If the pyroxene is decomposing very slowly in the environment, and let's say it always remains in the water, even with the mill shutdown, the eel will not get normal, will always have a problem. So the point is, if the conclusion says कि pyroxene reason नहीं है, ये कुछ और reason हो सकता है, reason being pyroxene तो decompose होता ही नहीं है environment में, और अगर वो पानी में रहता है तो eels तो कभी I would say they will never be normal. So anything which would be, I would say, hitting or I would say demeaning, और जो भी उसको डिस्ट्रॉय करता है कंक्लूजन को, वो वीकन कर देगा आर्ग्यूमेंट को. सो व्हाट एग्जैक्टली, लेट्स से इफ मूविंग इनटू द ऑप्शंस, द फर्स्ट ऑप्शन सेज some studies that show that eel recover quickly during shutdowns were funded by leather manufacturers. What exactly it's trying to say is that leather manufacturers ने ये स्टडी करी थी, तो एक्चुअली इट हैज गॉन आउट ऑफ द स्कोप. अब ये चीज इस पैसेज के में कहीं भी मेंशन नहीं है. लेकिन it has brought a point to I would say demean the whole passage, but that is out of the scope here. The second part is the rate at which paraffin decomposes varies depending on the condition to which it is exposed. Now, this point is even not hitting your conclusion. So what exactly, when we are talking about in this passage, what we are looking at is that the paraffin decomposes very slowly in the environment is a premise, is one of a fact. The B statement actually is hitting the proof part, which is also cannot be the answer here. Now the third part, the normal river currents carry the paraffin present in the river far downstream in a few hours. So what exactly it is saying is, अगर paraffin decompose भी कर रहा है slowly, then also एक normal river current उसको एकदम डाउनस्ट्रीम में ले जाता है. इसका मतलब क्या है कि अगर वो शटडाउन्स होते हैं तो पानी जो कि paraffin rich water actually doesn't remain there and it actually is taken downstream. So in obviously what exactly it is trying to say is कि paraffin वहां पे था ही नहीं, इस वजह से वो normal yields are getting normal. So actually it is actually in a way hitting the argument very straightforward. So what we will do is we will hold this point, okay? We will not mark it wrong and we will hold it. It seems to be very correct. The D part. Some of the yield did not recover rapidly from the changes that were induced, physiological changes that was induced by the changes in the hormone concentration. So what it is saying is, some of the yields did not recover rapidly from the changes that were induced by the changes in the hormone concentration. That is also has gone away from our passage. The last point is the connection between hormone concentration and physiological abnormalities is not thoroughly understood. Now it then once more it has started hitting the main premise of the passage. This also cannot be the answer. So the only thing which we are close to is the third part. Now what exactly I have done here is I have the first part. What is the part of it when we tried solving this question? The first part was when we try to divide the whole passage into different parts, like assumptions or an inference or in conclusion. So when this is much more like maths, where we are dividing the whole thing into different factors or multiples, and then hitting what we know, what we don't know, and how we are going to carry it forward. Now here what we did was we divided the passage into different parts, like let's say premise, assumption, inference, conclusion. And as the question said, you have to weaken the argument. So obviously weakening the argument means weakening the conclusion. So the first part comes as to identify a conclusion and then to hit it. So what we actually did in this question is we divided the whole question into different parts, just like any maths question, and we were able to solve it very quickly and much more accurately. Even your accuracy level will also rise a lot. So पर्सपेक्टिव में पहला ये रखना है सीआर में कि वो एक मैथ्स का सेक्शन है और मुझे मैथ्स के मोड में आ जाना है जब ये सीआर का क्वेश्चन देखता हूँ. सेकंड, ये लॉजिकल वर्ल्ड है. लॉजिकल वर्ल्ड में और रियलिस्टिक वर्ल्ड में फर्क होता है और उस लॉजिकल वर्ल्ड के लॉजिक और रियलिस्टिक वर्ल्ड के लॉजिक चेंजेस. एंड ऑलवेज रिमेंबर that every section in an IQ test, including the CR, is actually a test of your understanding. Okay, chalo. Thank you. Thanks for joining.